Dear friends, I have been working as a medical doctor for 40 years, so I know something about man, anatomy, physiology, illnesses. But now I would like to focus on the origin of man. What are we? Where do we come from? What is our position in this world? Man's role in creation is obvious. Man is the image of God. He has mind, intelligence, consciousness, moral awareness, and also free will. He is destined to be vice ruler over earth and living things. He is destined to worship God and after this life live in eternal glory with Him. But the question which is interesting is when and why was man made an animal from the image of God? This happened in the 17th century. Until the 17th century, Bible was considered history. The proof, this is a Bible in Britain published in 1702, and it has a picture of Noah's Ark with all the animals in it. So up to the 17th century, people believed that the Bible is history. But what made this change? There were no scientific reasons, but only political motives for making man into an animal. Not then, not now. Actually, the existence of God has always been self-evident for everybody. Atheism is nothing but a myth. Paul writes in Romans 1:21 about people. They know God. Everybody knows God. There's no atheism. But they do not give Him the honor that belongs to Him, nor do they thank Him. Atheism has consequences. This is in Psalm 14. It's very interesting that there are also consequences to thinking that there is no God. I cite the psalm, "Fools say to themselves, there is no God. They are all corrupt, and they have done terrible things. Don't they know, asks the Lord, are all these evildoers ignorant?" But today, on the contrary, the existence of God is an undeniable scientific fact. This is very fascinating, and you can make up your own mind and decision if this is true or not. Why is it an obvious fact? Because only Bible's account of origins explains life and man. Because God in the Bible tells us something that we could not know if He didn't tell us what has happened. Bible's account of origins explains life and man. It says in the Bible, "What is man that you are mindful of him? You have made him a little lower than the angels," in Psalm 8. "Let us make man in our image, and let them have dominion over all the earth." So God created man in His own image. Male and female created He them in Genesis. And the Lord God, Jesus was the creator. This is very important. Formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. This is where our consciousness comes from. Consciousness is the biggest problem in science today. Nobody knows what it is. It's even hard to define. But this is where our consciousness comes from. I'll tell more about this soon. So, a little bit lower than the angels. This refers to Christ. Here is Christ in Gethsemane. He knows that he has to go on the cross, and an angel came to comfort him. You know this story in the Garden of Gethsemane. The disciples were sleeping and snoring. But the image of God here is God himself. Spontaneous origin of life from stardust, origin of a cell from warm soup, an origin of all different organisms from that cell, origin of sex, that means man and woman, an origin of consciousness from brain chemistry, are nothing but fiction. This is not possibly scientifically to explain. It cannot be explained. But all this is explained in Genesis. This is why Genesis is so important. It is a historical document. Interesting thing is Darwinism predicted in the Bible? I think it might be, but you can draw your own conclusion. Because it says in Romans 1, from the creation of the world, the invisible things of him are clearly seen, being understood through the things that are made, so that they are without excuse. The atheists are without excuse. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and to birds and to four-footed beasts and creeping things. I think it looks like in Romans 1 the arrival of neo-Darwinism and its consequences are foretold. What are the consequences? You can home read the rest of the Romans first chapter and you know what are the consequences. But we are not stardust. The academy, the university wants to say that we are nothing but stardust. But is that true or is that just fiction? Actually, it's surprising that there are no scientific reasons to choose atheism. Charles Lyell was a politician, he was a lawyer. He wanted to free science from Moses after the French Revolution. He wanted to kick out the King of England. Like they sing in England, God save the king, God save the queen. Charles Lyell was a politician. He wanted to free science from Moses to kick out the king. And God-hating Darwin transformed the image of God into image of an animal. Why did Darwin hate God? Because he married his cousin. She was rich, so Darwin married money. He didn't need to work, he married money. But it's a problem getting married with your cousin, because many of Darwin's children died because of genetic disease. That's the problem of marrying your cousin. So Darwin started to hate God. He said, I want to kill God in his correspondence, which he did, in a way. So today the time has arrived to think scientifically and not believe in philosophies in questions of origins. I'm a physician. I have studied biochemistry, biophysics, cell biology, mathematics, probability mathematics. For me, it's impossible scientifically to accept a claim that a group of cells could turn into Einstein. I have studied medicine in France, and I had an anatomy professor who was later the dean of the faculty of Montpellier, which is the oldest medical faculty in the world, very prestigious. He was a Christian, and he said that we cannot see that it would be possible if we get a first cell should become a man by adding 3,000 times more information, because if one primitive cell should evolve into man, it can't be done, because first if the man evolving would get the liver, could he wait for a million years to get the kidneys? No. Man has to be created in a few minutes or in a second. Take something away, it dies. It has to be created on the spot. This is scientific. it's unscientific to claim that from some kind of primitive cell man could evolve. They don't have a mechanism. They say it happened, but where is the mechanism? Human body contains 37,000 billion cells, 300 different cell types. This is quite a lot. This is like, for instance, the eye. The atheists and Darwinists say that the eye is not well designed because if light is coming from here, here's the light-sensitive cells, it has to go through all these cells. They say it's bad design. No, it's not, because a few years ago they found these Müller cells, which are like light-leading cables, which enable us to see colors clearly. Now I ask the ladies how many different colors can, I don't say a man distinguish, but the woman distinguish. Because I know this when I go to the shop to buy some clothes, so it takes time to get the right color. But how many shades of color can man distinguish? Have any suggestions?
Millions.
Millions, that's the right answer. Millions. And it's made possible because of these Müller cells, which treat the light in such a way that it is possible. So it's not a poor design. Look at the different kinds of cells. There is, like on your left-hand side, this is the Purkinje cell in the cerebellum. From one Purkinje cell, there can be 200,000 connections to other cells. This is important in communication. Like if I do something like wave my hand and talk, this is very important wiring to make that possible. I don't see anybody sleeping yet, but now that you're looking here with your eyes open, there comes 1,000 million photons each second to your eyes. And the eyes elaborate them by 60 different retinal cell types in 20 channels. When you're looking here, it's like 1 million PCs were in operation. It takes 20% of what you ate there just to make this image. So when they say in the school books that eye is a camera, this is not true. Eye has nothing to do with the camera. Eye is a window through which your brain looks out. This is what we know about the eyes. I have been a member of a society which gives money for eye research, so I know quite a lot about the eyes. And the claim in school books that it is a camera, it is utterly false. It is something else. It's a computer. It's a huge computer. I said that creation is an undeniable scientific fact. Well, how can I say that? Because DNA proves it in writing. You have a document which is proven in writing. Here's a document which is proven in writing. In every cell you have 3.5 billion letters in a row. This is the code that determines your hair color, your eye color. It's a code. And it's just a row of 4 different letters. And the code is such that from these 3 letters, from these 4 letters, the code forms words of 3 letters. And now you start to read from here. Start from the blue one, you got one set of instructions. But then jump over to the next letter, this red. You get another set of instructions. Then you can go to the third one, you get a third set of instructions. So even here there's 3 instructions on top of each other. But then you can read it like Hebrew, from the right to the left, same thing. 4th code, 5th code, 6th code. Now you understand that who can make a program like this? Nobody. Bill Gates said that this is like a computer program. He's a Microsoft man. Bill Gates said this is like a computer program, but much, much more difficult than Microsoft can do. Now you can understand that if there is a mutation, if you change a letter here, you change because there's two it's a double band of DNA, like I will show soon. You change 12 programs at the same time. If one program is getting better, how can you claim that 11 programs should get better also? Every mutation, every change in this God-created code means dying, cancer, sickness, getting older. It does not get better through mutations, because even if it did in the red code, it can't get good in all the other ways of reading this. This is called the reading frame. This is like a little bit that, like there was a blue book would be the War and Peace, and the red book would be Bible, and the green book would be like some hymn book. You get 3 books on top of each other. You get 12 books on top of each other. Maybe even 20. Because now recently there has been found that some uses a tricky code. They made 6-letter words. So we know very little about this code. What we know is that God has done this. Nobody can do that, not even Bill Gates. And it doesn't get better by mistakes. That's easy to understand. DNA is a double helix. This is a 4-dimensional operating system. The 4th dimension comes from epigenetics. I don't go into that, but it's very interesting. There's up to 12 messages, maybe even more, on top, one on top of the other in 3.5 billion letters. That means 42 billion letters in every cell. This can be compared to about 40,000 Bible-sized books in your every cell, or a 1 kilometer long bookshelf in every one of your cells. God is fantastic. You got this in all of your cells. And you need this because you have 300 different cell types. You have kidneys, liver, brain. All is programmed in just one cell. Believe it or not, when you started life, you were just one cell. All this information had to be packed in there. It was packed in this library because God is genius, of course. So it's silly to say that mutations would make us better. No, they don't. Bible says, in the beginning was the Word, John 1:1. It's understandable that atheists say that nothing created everything. I don't believe that. Nothing did not create everything. It is fiction that information should arise from nothingness or Big Bang dust. Spontaneous origin of information is not possible from alphabet soup. Information, this is important, information always comes from an intelligent source. And biological information, this is the hard part of this lecture. Biological information is semantic information written in code language and determines a function. This is what it is. This soup would never produce that. But this is what they teach. A soup should give us some information. This is silly. It is utterly unscientific to claim something like that. Men can speak, write, read, and compute. I love mathematics. I don't know if everybody here loves, but there's one I knew you would lift up your hand. Mathematics is important because without mathematics there is no logic. And mathematics is something wonderful because it has a life of its own. You cannot touch it, you cannot weigh it, you cannot measure it. It is there. And the important thing about mathematics is that physics is mathematical. If I drop this, I can calculate the time it takes for it to drop. It is mathematical. This is something that a Nobel Prize winner Eugene Wigner said, that the fact that physics is mathematical is something that nobody understands, and we don't even deserve it. But God has been very nice to us. If it was not mathematical, we couldn't send people to the moon or a rocket to Mars. These are God's wonders. Wherever you look, you see design. And the atheists say that there's no design here, but everywhere is design. We have vocabulary, we can verbalize thoughts. Look what it says in John, Gospel of John. This is very important. The John Gospel, first chapter, is very important. It says that before the world was created, the Word already existed. Word was the same as God. Word was the source of life. Word became a human being, the Lord. We are destined to communicate truth to our fellow men and to pray to God. That is our job here. The purpose of life, what is it? Who knows? The purpose of life is to know Jesus. If you have reached the purpose of your life if you know Jesus. That is the purpose of life. Easy. This doesn't produce anything. Richard Dawkins said that if we make chimpanzees play on the computers, so they would soon write the works of Shakespeare. Can this happen? Somebody calculated this. It would take 20 billion years just to write one sentence. So information always comes from an intelligence source which is outside this creation. The eternal God gave the information. It is very interesting that what is time? Very difficult questions. But you can appreciate time only if you have matter. When matter came, time started. When matter disappears, like it says in second letter of Peter, that in the end all atoms will burn away, time stops because there's nothing with which we can measure time. This is easy to understand, that you can see how time goes, because going into children's room, you see all the mess out there. The quantity of the mess tells you how long time it has been since the mother was there. This is easy. But you don't get information only from an intelligence source. And the cell is very complicated. It's extremely complicated, and information is stored in DNA. And it's interesting that all data in Google could be stored into your body's DNA easily. So this is how fantastic God we have. Today you can put, today's paper you can store in DNA. You can store pictures in DNA. You can store anything in there. But all the data which is in the Google, which is huge amount, could be stored easily into your body's DNA storage. And a lot of room would be left over. Look at how wonderful God we have. The DNA instructions for 2 million organisms could be stored into 2% of a mosquito's weight. This was calculated by John Lennox, who visited here. We went to eat in a restaurant and we had time to wait for the food. So he calculated. He's a professor of mathematics. I say, how much would the DNA of all the living organisms weigh? 0.035 milligrams, or 2% of a mosquito's weight. This is what God can do. I mean, he's genius. They say in all school books that from primitive soup arise cells. This is really silly, because I have studied biochemistry and biophysics and probability mathematics. This is foolish to claim. If you believe that chemistry and physics are okay, you know this cannot happen. And to prove my point is that today $1 million is on the table for you if you solve this. You get Nobel Prize plus $1 million tomorrow if you go and solve this problem. This cannot be solved. This doesn't happen. You hear news about finding water on some Enceladus moon, or was it Saturn or Jupiter, I don't remember. If there's water, there is life, say the scientists. This is silly. This cannot happen. If you believe in physics and chemistry, spontaneous birth of a cell, it is impossible. And even if a cell somehow appeared, it could not even proceed to an embryo without a pre-programmed proofreading and repair system and pre-programmed waste disposal and service system. The Nobel Prize was awarded in 2015 to a group of 3 scientists who found the proofreading and repair system. Every time when a cell makes a copy of itself, there's a lot of mistakes. There's a scanner and a reparation machine which puts it right. A Japanese scientist, professor in medicine, got a Nobel Prize in 2016 for finding out there's a service and recycling and cleaning system in the cells, because cells produce thousands of products daily and it has to be cleaned, and the machines that produce them have to be repaired. He got the Nobel Prize for finding that. So even if there was a cell, it couldn't do nothing without the proofreading, repair system, and the cleaning system. This all has to be in there for something to happen. Atheists always say that in the beginning there was primitive cells. But I can say there is no such thing as a primitive cell. All cells are very complicated. Even the E. coli bacteria, which are in your gut, are very complicated because they have 6 motors and they know where to go. They have eyes, they can see. If there's too much ultraviolet, they go away. If there's food, they go there. They have a mouth and eye and a data system and 6 motors where they move. That is no simple cell, even though it's a bacterium. Now the question to ask, where did these systems come from? I want to encourage you to think yourself. Don't believe what they say to you. I've been teaching medical students for 20 years to do medicine. So I always say that you have to doubt everything. Bible has a good word for this. Never trust what a man says. Luther said that what men think is idolatry. But what God says in the Bible, that is the fact. Be careful. Think yourself. You can reach the conclusions yourself very easily. It's very important to think yourself. So when this information is copied, it's copied at the speed with machines, with a speed of 750 bases or code symbols per second. It produces errors. There has to be a scanner and a repair system, otherwise we would die next week. Now we know these repair systems, and today mankind is suffering from over 200,000 typos. This tells us about the tale of original perfection. When God created man, was perfect. Then there was the fall into sin. Everything started to rust and go bad. So we know how many typos there are in mankind. We know how fast they accumulate. If you get a child, is the child better than you? No, because the child always has at least 100 problems that you didn't have. So we can go back to the beginning when everything was perfect. We know how bad it is now. We know the speed. So we can say that man was created 6,000 years ago. This is science. This is easy. Can't deny this. Well, are we updated apes, as the atheists like to say that you are nothing but an updated ape? Well, let's take a look. They say that there's 1% difference between chimpanzee and man. This is really silly. I mean, how did they get this number? This is an interesting thing. They got this number even before they had sequenced the man's DNA and chimp's DNA. They were talking about 1% even before they knew the code, because it has to be so if evolution is true. This is interesting. They had the result ready even before they started doing research. Why is 98 to 99% genetic similarity between modern humans and modern chimps extremely important to theoretical evolutionists? They need a similarity that close to have humans and chimps evolve in the alleged 3 to 6 million year time span from a supposed human-chimpanzee common ancestor. Their statistical model absolutely requires that 99% similarity. If this is not so, evolution is falsified. Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins has researched this 99% claim. He tells us that researchers threw out a lot of data in the research articles. They were cherry-picking the areas of DNA between humans and chimps that were highly similar and throwing out areas, including areas that would not line up properly. This is not science. This is not science. When Tompkins researched the data, he came up with DNA similarities between 81 to 86% when he included the dissimilar data also. This great difference is way outside the realm of theoretical evolution. It, in fact, demolishes evolution. This has happened. Evolution is demolished. So they had the picture on the box was a man, and they tried to force fit the chimp's pieces, puzzle pieces into it, but you can't do it like that. It doesn't work. And even worse, Y chromosome shock. Men are XY, ladies are XX. The human and chimp Y chromosomes are horrendously different, 30%. This is not predicted by evolution. It falsifies evolution. But you see, evolutionists, they want to explain everything because according to atheists, everything in nature proves evolution. So they say, well, Y chromosomes evolved in this case faster than expected. What is this kind of an explanation? A theory that claims to explain everything explains nothing. Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins said that when we take plant and animal genomes and compare their DNA sequences to other plants and animals, we see a small core set of genes shared between different plants or animals. But then you have a whole lot of other genes that are unique to each type of organism that you couldn't find any match for in databases. This kind of thinking leads to a result that we are 50% bananas because we share some genes which are important for metabolism. When scientifically studied, things were not matching up with evolution's predictions and models, but all scientific findings were matching up with what a divine engineer would use. The Bible talks about creatures created after their own kind. There'd be repeated code just like a computer programmer would use to perform basic functions, and we'd see, on the other hand, unique code that was creature-specific. In other words, we saw unique genomes specific to a created kind, just as predicted by the Bible, says Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins. Well, some major things that separate us from animals: brain, consciousness, speech, expressions, upright stature, standing on 2 feet, skillful hands, an interesting long childhood. Well, neo-Darwinists say that our brain is really huge, developed after we learned to cook meat. This is not nice. I think the vegetarians would get really mad. This is silly. But they have these silly stories. Now think, it's important that you think yourself. This is what you're fed. You go any university, they say, if you ask where did the huge brain come from, because we learned to cook meat. This is so stupid. If you eat a lot of meat, what happens? Your brain doesn't grow, but your kidneys shrink. It destroys your kidneys. This is really funny. I think the evolution story is a comedy. Look at this brain. The brain of a chimpanzee has a volume of 370 milliliters on average. In contrast, humans have a brain size of 1,350 milliliter on average. Now, this is interesting. Human brain has more switches than all computers on Earth. Researchers at Stanford developed a new imaging method that enables visualization in unprecedented detail of the myriad connections between nerve cells in the brain. The human brain is truly awesome. They found that the brain's complexity is beyond anything they'd imagined, almost to the point of being beyond belief, says Stephen Smith, a professor of molecular and cellular physiology and senior author of the paper describing the study. One synapse, which links the cells by itself, is more like a microprocessor with both memory storage and information processing elements. It's more than a mere on-off switch. In fact, one synapse may contain on the order of 1,000 molecular scale switches. There's a picture of myelinated nerve fibers, and here's some of these synapses. There's 1 billion synapses in your brain. If you should put one synapse to its correct right place, 1 per second, all day and all night, it would take somebody, an electrician, over 30 million years to assemble your brain. Who did it? It says in Psalm, God has woven us together in the womb. These are things nobody knows. But you see, there's a lot of things that man doesn't understand, and even more things that we will not know. Einstein said that don't think that God will show you all his secrets. But just think, who has assembled the brain? One connection per second takes 30 million years to assemble your brain. Who did it? Nobody has an answer, except Bible. A single human brain has more switches than all the computers and routers and internet connections on Earth. Japanese tried to simulate what 1% of your brain does in 1 second, and it took a supercomputer 40 minutes. Life-size model of brain, if the synapse would be the size of a memory stick, would consume the electric output of several nuclear power stations. Here's a supercomputer. Take 100 of these, and you need electric power from many nuclear plants if you should ape what your brain is doing. But God has done it so that you just need some porridge to make it function, because electric current is so weak. But this is all super intelligent. There's little pumps pumping out a little electrical difference in the neurons, and this functions. We could never accomplish anything like that. A typical healthy brain houses some 200 billion nerve and supporting cells, which are connected to one another via about 1 million billion synapses. Each synapse functions like a microprocessor, and tens of thousands of them can connect a single neuron to other nerve cells. In the cerebral cortex alone, there are roughly 125 trillion synapses, which is about how many stars will fill 1,500 Milky Way galaxies. So take a 1,500 Milky Way galaxies, that's the number of synapses you have in your cortex alone. Think what a fantastic machine we have here. This has all been recently found out a few years ago in Stanford University. The synapses are, of course, so tiny, less than a thousandth of a millimeter in diameter, that humans haven't been able to see with great clarity what exactly they do and how. Beyond knowing that their numbers vary over time, plasticity, it's a living supercomputer. I'm an old man, you're young, but if you want to avoid Alzheimer's, dementia, study Hebrew when you're old, so you get a better brain, because it's a plastic instrument. Do we know how the human brain operates? We know almost everything about the brain except how it operates, says neuroscientist Rudolf von Linus. This article was last week in Duodecim. It's a magazine for doctors. I like this because they say we know almost everything about the brain except how it operates. Nobody knows how it operates. We will never know. Because you see, your brain has more power than all the computers in the world put together. Nobody understands how it works. Nobody has the slightest idea what is consciousness. Can't even be defined. Then we claim that we know everything. Because God made man with his fingers from dust. What did he do then? He blew his spirit into man's nostrils, and man became a living soul. That is where consciousness comes from. We are all conscious of God. We have eternity in our hearts. We have the 10 Commandments in our hearts. We want to go home to heaven, but most of people are running away from that. But the only way you can go there is to get to know Jesus, who created all this. And what did it cost him? He had to go to the cross. And this is how terrible sin is. We have been created for communication. We can speak, we have facial expressions, we have gestures with hand. 75% of our motor cortex is wired for communication. We can draw a picture of a homunculus, what a man would look like if the body would match cortex nerve wiring. Big hands, big mouth, big face, because it's wired for communication. You see it in the cortex. 75% of the motor cortex is wired for communication. When speaking, up to 100 muscles are used. The anatomy of the throat is designed for speaking, breathing, and eating. When I speak, about 15 muscles are simultaneously in use, and when I speak in 1 second, these muscles make 225 contractions per second. It's a very difficult thing to speak. It takes a couple of years to learn to speak, and children have adult speech at 12 years of age. If you hear a child speak, you can immediately, without seeing the child, you know it's a child speaking. It takes 12 years to master speaking. Humans uniquely have complex vocal cords, allowing us a great range of sounds, but preventing us from drinking and breathing simultaneously like chimpanzees. Moreover, we have very muscular tongues and lips, allowing us to accurate manipulation of our voices. This is why we have pointed chins. Whereas chimps have receding chins, we attach our many lip muscles to the many prominent to the prominent lower chin, but chimpanzees lack many of these muscles and so do not need a protruding chin. But the atheist says that our oral cavity is lousy design. But this lousy design that they say is in fact the key to human speech. It's a staple for Darwinists who compile lists of human anatomical features supposedly demonstrating unintelligent or botched design. We hear constantly that the design of the human larynx, trachea and oral cavity is poor because it allows for choking on food. The ease with which we can choke is used as an example of unintelligent design and is included in evolutionists' lists of fatal flaws in human anatomy. The existence of the pharynx, anthropologist Scott Edran complains. They say humans are more liable than other animals to choke as they attempt to simultaneously coordinate eating, breathing, and speaking. Rational Wiki adds, drinking and laughing at the same time makes the drink come out of the person's nose or potentially choke the victim of such a lousy design and so on. But we can have the last laugh. Adult speech is achieved at 12 years, so long childhood is needed. At birth, human tongue is flat in the mouth as is the case for other mammals. The larynx, which rests atop the trachea, is anchored to the root of the tongue. As infants suckle from the bottle or from the mother, they raise the larynx to form a sealed passage from the nose to the lungs, allowing them to breathe while liquid milk flows around the larynx. This is how it works when babies suckle. Most mammalian species retain this morphology throughout life, which explains why cats or dogs can lap up water while breathing. In humans, however, a developmental process that spans the first 8 to 10 years of life forms the adult version of the vocal tract. First, the skull is reshaped, shortening the relative length of the oral cavity. The tongue begins to descend down into the pharynx, while the neck increases in length and becomes rounded in the back. Following these changes, half the tongue is positioned horizontally in the oral cavity, while the other half is positioned vertically in the pharynx. The two halves meet at an approximate right angle at the back of the throat. The tongue's extrinsic muscles anchored in various bones of the head can move the tongue to create an abrupt tenfold change in the vocal tract's cross-sectional area. Why is the tenfold change needed in the vocal tract's cross-sectional area? This is why. The three tenors. We could not talk, we could not sing without this change. I think God loves music because you remember King Saul was sometimes angry and depressed. He wanted David to play and sing, and he was feeling better after that. So we couldn't do this if our throat was designed like the atheists would like to have it. We couldn't even speak if the atheists would design our throat. As it turns out, the configuration of the adult human tongue's oral and pharyngeal proportions and shape allow mature humans' vocal tracts to produce the quantal vowels I, U, A, as in the Ford Ma. These quantal vowels produce frequency peaks analogous to saturated colors and are more distinct than other vowels and are resistant to small errors in tongue placement. Thus, while not required for language, these vowel sounds buffer speech against misinterpretation. This may explain why all human languages use these vowels. So Darwin and his latter-day followers may complain about the design of the oral cavity, but they'd have a harder time doing the complaining and being understood if it weren't for this instance of poor design. Note that all human languages use these vowels, an indication that this is no side feature for clear communication, and speech, of course, is arguably the keystone of humanity's exceptional status in the world of life. Chimp is no Pavarotti. Never sing, never speak but can eat without choking. Well, who told you to talk while you eat? Didn't your mother say that you cannot talk when you eat? Expressions. How many facial expressions can a man produce? Well, the answer is there. We can produce over 100,000 facial expressions. We have, in addition to these 26 muscles, we have 24 muscles under the skin that are attached to skin, and we can produce over 100,000 facial expressions. This is clear over-design. If evolution was true, why would evolution create 100,000 different facial expressions? We have also whites around our irises, whereas chimpanzees usually have a dark brown color. This makes it easier to see where other humans are looking. Eye direction is important to communication. When you look at and talk with somebody looking at you, you know exactly where the other one is looking. If you have a big bump here, so it's looking at that, you know with 1 millimeter exact where they are looking. But with chimps, you don't know what they look at. Maybe if you have some peanuts in your hands, they might look at that. Look at how wonderful God is here. Look at these faces, 100,000 different expressions. God creates beauty. And if you compare to these guys, there's a little difference. They never can produce anything. They use their facial muscles for drinking and eating. Look at how much the faces tells. This is Obama flirting with the Danish Prime Minister in Mandela's funeral. This looks very sad faces. Look at Obama's wife. She doesn't like this. So this tells the whole story. You don't need any text. And New York Times wrote about this, that an article after seeing these pictures, is Obama's marriage crushing? So look how important the expressions on. 25% of our brain cortex is wired for expressions. Hands and feet are completely different. Did our feet evolve from fins? The evolutionists say that from this fish fin came this foot. And they say that it was just one mutation that did it. This is pure nonsense. Upright stature requires a lot of things. Tailored balance organ, straight face, column to the base of skull. You have to move from the neck, it here. Forearch back, hips straight, locking knees. It's very important the knee has a 4-bar hinge. It's a very complicated thing. Long legs, arch feet, strong big toes. So this is a huge change. Walking separates men from the chimps. Chimps are no long-distance runners. Engineers worldwide have tried to build robots capable of stable and efficient walking. They are still far from achieving that goal. Even just to ape only one of the body's joint and muscle systems used in walking, ankle-foot complex or the knee or the hip-pelvis complex presents huge engineering challenges. Impossible to make a robot which can do the same thing as a man. An ideal robot needs at least these 3 human characteristics: a flexible heel, toe flexion, flexible arch, and so on. Our long striding legs are packed with spring-like tendons, muscles, and ligaments that enable us to briefly store elastic energy as we come down on a foot and then recoil to help propel us forward. Tellingly, the most important of these springs, our big, strong Achilles tendons, are not found in early human precursors such as Australopithecus. We have an unusually large percentage of fatigue-resistant, slow-twitch muscle fibers, which make for endurance rather than speed. Well, I go over that, but I ask you, is it possible for these Maasai men to outrun this antelope? Yes, it is. Very easy. Man can even outrun a horse. Bipedalism is the best way of locomotion because men can run long distances and faster than the animals. These animals can run about 10-20 kilometers maximum. Men can run the marathon 40 kilometers. It's easy for good shape young man to run out this. This is very interesting because walking on 2 feet is absolutely the best solution there is. And look at the balance, what we can do. Can you imagine chimpanzees doing that? Never. Man is super. Take Olympic gymnastics on the floor, for example. How is this possible? It's the balance organ, which is in the inner ear. It has cilia cells with little stones in this, and the stones go like that, and it tells us our position. Look at this design. They put some little stones in there. Sometimes the stones get loose, and I treated a lot of patients with that vertigo. It's very shocking, but when you tell them that your stones are loose in the inner ear, so they understand what is happening. There's so much detail in these things which sense our direction and turning, and it's incredible. I tell more about this in my book, The Image of God, which you can pick up now after this. There's also some other walkers inside our cells. There are molecules that walk. There are actually molecules that walk. They have 2 feet here, and they carry heavy loads, and there's a postal code here, and they have parts where they carry. There's a postal code here, so it goes to the right address, never failing. These walking molecules are kinesins. They are molecules that walk on 2 feet inside our cells. They take 100 strides per second. So all kinds of fantastic machinery in our body. The hand. Engineers have been trying to make a robotic hand without success. It's impossible. And they claim that this human hand evolved from the fin of a fish. Bible says, "Thou madest him to have dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put everything, all things under his feet." Let's talk about God's hands doing this. We can conduct orchestras, play instruments. I want to show this. Sir Isaac Newton is maybe the biggest scientist ever. So he says that in the absence of any other proof, the thumb alone would convince me of God's existence. Why? We have this smartphone muscle, FPL, which animals don't have. So 6 motors in the thumb. Sir Isaac Newton noted this already. This is incredible. But now I promised to talk 60 minutes. The time is up, but we can have a pause and then I can continue if you want to hear. But let's take some questions now if you have. Or then I can use the rest of the time giving some more information about the human body.
You can ask anything, please do.
Don't ask anything.
You seem to know so much.
But if you have some, or then I can use the rest of the time by showing the rest of the slides, whichever you prefer. Well, this is very interesting, this thumb, because there is actually a muscle. Humans have a unique muscle here, Flexor Pollicis longus, which separates from the other flexor, and this makes it possible to, this is an instrument, hand wearing an instrumented glove demonstrates the 33 types of tasks in the Fake's taxonomy, which means that the different things we can do. The chimp's foot is like a strong hand. It has nothing to do with the human foot. This could never evolve by mutations into the human ankle and foot. Never. It is too much. It would take hundreds of thousands of mutations that would go in the same direction. So it's silly to say that from this, which looks like a strong hand, a human foot and ankle should develop. And the closer we go to this human hand, you see you can put your thumb and fingers like that. There's so many, the deeper you go, the more design you see, because there's special kinds of little holes in the bone which have special tissue to guarantee that the object you're holding doesn't slip away. And in the end, there is special tissue to make some fine thing like repairing a watch or something like that. Animals can't do this, only man can do this stuff. 38 axles of movement here, 58 axles of movement in the upper arm. This cannot be copied by engineers, impossible. But then they say that it has evolved. This is silly. There was a recent scientific scandal. There was 3 Chinese scientists who published something. And this is interesting because these 3 Chinese scientists published an article, and it was taken away from the journal immediately. Why did that happen? This explains why creation science is not published. They always say to me that if you know so much, why don't you publish? If I publish, they don't put it in the paper. I have seen this many times. I've written, and my friends have written hundreds of articles which they don't publish. But look at what happened. This paper, written by good, intelligent, fine Chinese scientists, said in the paper, the red text, hand coordination should indicate the mystery of the creator's invention. Although the Chinese authors later said that there was a linguistic mix-up, but they put in the creator's place evolution's invention. But the anger came already. The study of these Chinese scientists claimed that the relationship between the anatomical structure of the hand and its ability to grasp objects is the proper design by the creator to perform a multitude of daily tasks in a comfortable way. But this scientific paper, it was a very good study. I read it, excellent science. The scientific paper on the anatomy of the human hand was retracted by a leading scientific journal following criticism of references it made to a creator. If you give the glory to creator, the article, which was very good, was retracted immediately. This you see what is today's science. It is not so scientific because it does not allow God or a designer. What is science? Science is trying to find the best answer without God. That is science. But the design is so obvious that I wonder how long this can continue. The change could come very fast. Well, I'll say a few words about this genetic entropy, how much time left for mankind. You see, all created kinds are dying out. During this speech, 20 different animals have died out. Why do they die out? A mutation is generally any error during the copying of DNA. So when babies are produced, mutations can creep into their genome. But how many? If we only count mutations that change a single genetic letter, point mutations, there are an enormous 100 to 300 new mutations occurring in every person in every generation. So that means if your parents should have no mutations, you have 100 to 300, your children will have 200, 600, your grandchildren will have 300, 900. It goes worse, 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 worse all the time. The DNA was not stable. Even if it has a repair machine, it cannot clean out those mutations. The long-term consequence of such effects is an expected genetic deterioration in the baseline human condition, potentially measurable on the time scale of a few generations in westernized societies. And because the brain is a particularly large mutational target, this is of particular concern. People are actually getting more stupid all the time. Sorry about this, but it's a scientific fact because about 3,500 genes govern the buildup of the brain, and it's getting worse all the time. So it's a long study in Britain actually, which shows that people are getting more stupid all the time, which we cannot avoid. People have been very smart. Think of those people who built the pyramids with almost bare hands. We couldn't do that, but they did. Sorry about this, but that's a fact. As a population, we've developed at least 1 million genetic variants in the last 5,000 years. Between 5,000 and 10,000 years ago, 73% of all protein coding single nucleotide variations and approximately 86% of them predicted to be deleterious arose, a group of scientists studying this trend wrote. Today, the average person carries about 250, 300 mutations that impair some function. This is why you cannot marry your sister or brother. We also carry several more hundred variants that are neutral or cause minor problems. And this doesn't include variations at the sites of non-coding DNA. The degradation of the human genome. So you see that chimp doesn't get as man, but it goes bad. In the presence of such high mutation rates, preponderance of deleterious mutations, and lack of huge expendable proportions of offspring cannot be avoided. We return to what evolutionary theory claims happened. Even more complex and sophisticated genomes are supposed to have arisen step by step over eons with the help of copying errors. So this silly claim that there was a first cell 3.5 billion years ago and copying errors in that first cell produced apples and elephants and men and flies. This doesn't work like that. Science doesn't work like that. Essentially, all the mutations are harmful. They are unselectable. Unselectable mutations are the Trojan horse of evolution. They come in silently, being so small that they can infiltrate the entire population without being removed by natural selection. Eventually, they build up to such a point that they are fatal to the organism, and the population becomes extinct. The more time we give evolution to work wonders, the more organisms become extinct. Time is not the hero of the plot, it's the enemy. Evolution is a mechanism that leads to guaranteed extinction. How long until extinction of man? Is an interesting question. This mutational meltdown described above, also called genetic entropy, is at work in all multi-celled life. So this is a huge affair. Everything here is dying out. Alex Williams has shown that the extinction of life would take only a few thousand years, assuming that 100 new mutations occur per person per generation, and generation times are 20 years. There's a scientist, Michael Lynch, he's an atheist. He has calculated, he's blaming the doctors for this because we allow people who are not so well to have children, but he has said that humankind has 6 generations, then it will die out because of the accumulation of mutations. I like to quote the atheist because then nobody can say that this is a Christian doctor quoting Christians. I quote an atheist, Michael Lynch. So this is probably, he is probably right. Men will die out, according to him, in maybe in as little a time as 6 generations or 20 years. Conclusion. The very core of modern neo-Darwinism is mutation coupled with natural selection. But the actual data show that the overwhelming number of mutations are harmful, even if only slightly harmful, and that natural selection is useless most of the time. It cannot see most of the mutations in order to get rid of them. Far from being a viable mechanism for evolution, mutations sound the death knell for the evolutionary theory of common descent. Man's story is soon over, maybe in 6 generations. But the good news is Jesus comes soon, so we don't have to worry about that. Here's some books in English, Body by Design. These are all made by scientists who believe. I have this book, The Image of God, which you can pick up now at an unbelievable low price, which I will not mention here for the YouTube, but because they might get angry. This will be in the YouTube soon, this lecture. But I think I better stop here because I've gone 15 minutes over my time. But if you have now more answers, no more more answers than me, more questions, so please ask. But this is an interesting thing because what can we learn from this? It is self-evident that there is a God, like Paul says in Romans. It is self-evident. And the timetable, the historical timetable from the creation to now is also self-evident because God created perfect man, could easily live 1,000 years, no problem. But then the mutations came. There's about 1 million variants and over 200,000 bad mutations in humankind, so we are close to extinction. So it's easy to calculate that the perfect man was created 6,000 years ago because we know the speed at which the mutations accumulate and we know the number of mutations now. And the claim that the man has been here for hundreds of thousands of years is silly because we would have died out because of these mutations 10 or 20 times already. This is science. This is easy. It's not hard to understand. This is how it is. But there's a lot of people who don't want to hear this, who don't want to see this, and they don't want to accept this. But the important point is that you have to think yourself and you have to make up your conclusions yourself, because there's the academic world with hundreds of institutes studying evolution, thousands of professors making their living by studying color changes in the wings of the butterflies and whatever. But that is just variation. It has nothing to do with evolution. Evolution means that from stardust to elephants or men. This is just philosophy. It's not science.
Question about the stars. We know that some stars are could be over 1 billion light years away, which means if we consider the Earth to be only like 6,000 years old, our star sky should lack many stars, because the light would still be on the way here. So why do we see the stars that are said to be like over thousands of years ago, like far away?
This is an interesting question. It is often asked. And I can reply to that. Creation was a miracle. It was a miracle which man cannot understand or explain. I'll show you what I mean. Who was the creator? It was Jesus. Through him have everything been created, says the Bible. You remember Martha, Maria, and Lazarus. Lazarus was sick. Jesus heard about that. So he didn't go immediately to see Lazarus. He waited 4 days. Why did he wait 4 days? It was hot climate, so he wanted to wait 4 days before going to see Martha, Maria, and Lazarus, so that everybody would know that the body was already smelling. Like Martha said, as you remember, she said to Jesus that Lazarus' body is smelling already. What did Jesus do? Come out, Lazarus. He came out. And the interesting thing was that nobody denied that this happened. There were 2 reasons for Jesus waiting. First, he wanted that the body of Lazarus should smell, and there were hundreds of Jews to be as witnesses. So there's so many witnesses that not even the high priests didn't say that don't lie to us, because you get hundreds of witnesses. So that is a miracle, right? Rotting body comes out when the Creator, Jesus, says, come out, Lazarus. So when Jesus created, he said that he created the sun and the moon and the stars also. He said, and they were there. What about the speed of light? This is a tricky question because the atheists have this Big Bang story. To make it work, they have the horizon problem. You can Google the horizon problem. It's a very difficult problem that can only be explained if in the beginning you exceed the speed of light. So they do their tricks also. Without exceeding the speed of light, their story doesn't work. I don't believe in Big Bang. I think it's the most stupid thing ever. But a lot of people believe in it. But they are also playing with the speed of light. If you look at the Google, the horizon problem, they cannot solve this only by exceeding the speed of light. But I don't worry about that. God created a perfect functioning universe. The trees did not have any growth rings. Adam and Eve didn't need the bottle. They were grown up. It was created ready. You see, there's a lot of things that are impossible to understand with the human brain, even if it's so superb as it is. There are a lot of secrets which God doesn't tell us. Einstein said that don't think that God will tell us all his secrets. If he did, we would be gods, if we should know that. I just say, I don't know, but it was a miracle. Jesus says, and it happens. That's my answer to you. Of course, there's many theories about that using the Einstein's formula. There's 2 theories. You can look up at creation.com, which is a good site. I know most of the writers there, they are specialists. Creation.com. Ask a question there, put a keyword, and you will get scientific articles on this question. But I take it, it's a miracle. It's a good question. Please.
I've heard a theory that about the God created world in 7 days. That you could also think, like, for example, think one day as a year or 100 years or stuff like that. So what do you think about that? Or is it possible, or do you think it's 7 days? They are really like days, 24 hours.
Thank you for that question. I try not to think myself because I ask a Jew what were the days. I have Jewish friends, Messianic Jewish friends. In fact, I became a Christian because a Messianic Jew told me about Jesus. But he evangelized me, a Messianic Jew. But that's very smart. And I asked a Jew that, what is this Yom Day? And he said, that is an easy question because it's his maternal language, Hebrew. He said that always when the day Yom is connected to a number, first day, second day, third day, and always if there's a time of the day, like morning, evening, always when there's a number and morning, evening, it's always 24 hours, always, without exception. And this is 401 times in the Bible. Then there's in the days of David, a long period, but there's no number, no morning, no evening. So this is what the text means. It's an historical account. It's not poetic. It's a historical account of the creation which God gave to us so that we should know. And the problem with this is that time is not the hero of this plot. My car out there, I hope I don't get a ticket. My car is 19 years old. It is rusting. It's getting worse. So the more time you have, it doesn't help evolution. The more time you have, the more certain is that everything dies out. This is the laws of thermodynamics. So they say they save this thing by putting millions of years, but they destroy their case because time kills. So I accept that God is all-knowing, all-powerful. He has decided to create this universe. Why? For Jesus, the triune God. Jesus was there when it was created. Jesus loved us so much that he wanted to save us from this fallen world. And to do that, he had to come here. He knew what would happen. Suffer, beaten, spit on, and crushed, and he was even sweating blood when the angel was comforting him in the judgment. This was a heavy price to pay. Bible knows you by name. It says in the Bible that God has given us a name. It's not Pekka, it's something else. I don't know what it is, but it says in the Bible. God knows us personally. He has written your name in the palm of his hand, says in the Old Testament, even if we put nails through those hands. So that's how much he loves us. Jesus loves. This is a big thing. It's up to you to choose. If you don't accept this love, there's nothing else. Then you have decided that I don't want to go to heaven, I want something else which is not so nice. So we have free will. We can choose. Everybody knows there is a God, says Paul. But most people don't respect him or thank him. I know from experience because I was a steel-hard atheist myself. I thought that Christians are stupid, they don't know anything about science. Then I met my wife and unfortunately she was the daughter of a priest. So I didn't listen to her nor to her father, but she was praying every night on her knees that somebody would tell me about these things. And I went to France to study and I met this Messianic Jew who was a biochemist, and he taught me biochemistry. And we were good friends, and we were in the camping in the mountains of southern France, and I thought that I will make this Jew atheist. But this guy was talking to me about Jesus. Well, that changed my life. Okay, very smart man. And also answer to prayer was that our anatomy professor was a Christian. He said that he was teaching us anatomy, like what the hand does, and he says that engineers cannot copy this. That's a good sermon. That's all he said. But I started thinking, who has done it? God, of course. So it's evident that there is a God. People are just running away from God. They have all kinds of reasons. But we have to pray pray, because the fact that you sit here and you believe in Jesus, it's a gift from God. Got to be thankful for that.
That kind of a question that, what do you think in this world where God lives, what is the purpose of science? Like, why is there science?
I love science because as a doctor I got to use all the finest machines and operation procedures. I done all kinds of stuff. I was a surgeon for half a year. Then I saw that this is not my stuff, because once you open a stomach, you don't know if it's a half an hour or 9 hours. That was not for my patients, but science is very important. Like Jesus said that the sick need a doctor. That's what he said. In Finnish, eivät terveet tarvitse parantajaa, vaan sairaat. So Jesus recommended the doctors because he knew that everybody is sick. Or does somebody think he is well, come to me, so I will find some sickness anyway. So there's not anybody who is completely healthy. This is a fallen world. And science is there to help us through the fallen world. Like in the 1920s, the most common reason for young people to die was what?
The Spanish sickness.
It was tuberculosis and pneumonia, and because we didn't have any antibiotics. So it's a big blessing to have antibiotics. I love the science. I'm in a society which gives, I've been there over 20 years, which gives research money to stomach diseases and eye diseases. So I follow very closely science. I have nothing against science. But science is misused if children are taught at school that from some primitive soup there comes cells. This is so unscientific, it makes me mad, because I know why that cannot happen. I have studied biochemistry, biophysics, probability, mathematics. I know it cannot happen. But this is what they are taught. I just got a mail today from Britain. I was there a month ago I gave this speech to 500 people in London, which you just heard. But I got a message from London that even in private schools, independent schools now in Great Britain, inspectors come there to spy on them. Are you teaching here creation? If you are, you don't get any money from the government. This is very interesting. Why not? Isn't the purpose of the school to teach children to become critical thinkers? What is this science which says that we do science, but we throw out God, close the door, leave him out? On what grounds? How can you do this? I mean, this is not fair game. If there is design, there is design. Like these 3 Chinese scientists who wrote in their article, praised the creators who has built this hand. Excellent scientific article. The only problem was that they praised God for making the hand. This is no fair game. I don't like this at all. But that's the way it is. It's the atheist establishment which wants to brainwash all kids in the same atheistic way of thinking. This is a political thing. I have lived in France 7 years, so I read the Le Monde on the internet. Thanks to Le Monde, I can read it for free. But Le Monde had an article, because I know a doctor in Paris, my age. He's doing the same thing. He's going in Paris to tell people the same thing that I tell here. So Le Monde was worried. They said that the creationism, the belief in the Bible, is coming to France, but we cannot accept this. Why? For political reasons, not scientific, but political reasons. It's a left-hand leftist paper, more or less, Le Monde, we cannot talk about the reliability of Bible for political reasons, because if we did, we would have to stop doing abortions and marrying same-sex people. Political reasons. Because all the scientific reasons point to design. There was a crisis meeting in London, Royal Society, I think it was 2 years ago. They were in crisis because the more intelligent atheists, they know that this doesn't work. This system, it doesn't work. It's nonsense. So they're trying to find some other solution. Before that, there was an Altenbury meeting also. They are now thinking, even a very famous Jewish atheist professor in New York University, don't remember his name now, but it's in my book, said that the theory of neo-Darwinism is most certainly false, which created huge uproar, because it is false. It is laughable. It's a comedy. Gases turning into planets and soups turning into cells, and one cell turning into oranges and apples and elephants and men. This is silly. It's a philosophy, storytelling. No science at all. But so strong is the hold of this establishment, anti-God establishment, that difficult to penetrate. But everybody has a brain. You can think yourself, make a solution. I got very good material. This The God of Wonders is a movie, 90 minutes, texted in over 20 languages. Very good animation. Scientists are telling the same thing that I do here. I got this book, The Image of God, and some other books there also. Usko ja tiede we gave out a week ago. It's 6 Finnish specialists talking about this topic. And kysymyksiä ja vastauksia luomisesta is very good. We translate it into Finnish. It has 60 trickiest questions that atheists are always ridiculing Christians. We answer all those questions there in Finnish. The book has sold over 500,000 copies in the world, so it's very good. But any more questions? Thank you so much. God bless you.